presentation. My name's Jim Walfridge, I'm a lecturer at King's College London. We're going to run this session until 4:15 and then go next door for the final plenary. We've got Nina Power, who's a lecturer in philosophy at Roehampton University. Maggie Mitchell, who's the mother of Zenon Mitchell, who was imprisoned for protesting against fees, and Ian Llewellyn, who was part of the campaign to defend Zenon at Sussex University, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So, Nina.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Jim. I'm just going to talk about some general issues regarding protests and education and situations on campus. I think one of the most recent developments, negative developments really, is that the UK Border Agency rescinding of the visa, possibility for allowing visas at London Metropolitan University, clearly motivated by a kind of racist appeal to kind of certain part of the Tory electorate, a desperate attempt to cut down numbers of people coming to the country, but having an extremely negative effect on those students affected, international students. Someone on appeal, but I think this is a kind of situation we're seeing increasingly, and lots of the other universities, mine included, have become incredibly rattled by this demand for international students, and so we're being told as lecturers to be much more, even more kind of using techniques of surveillance really on our students. So every register, we have to get the students to sign. Any single absence is recorded as an authorised and unauthorised absence to be checked up by the university. And we've become basically like a combination of service providers and police spies. And I think this is really, really seriously problematic. The position we're in campus is extremely difficult because it's split along the axis of kind of political repression and kind of economic demand. And I want to start by saying how kind of depressing things are in order to point out where we might be able to resist this. Obviously it was in a kind of general context of the pushing of a particular idea of domestic extremism, a category that was for a long time mainly applied to Muslims, and we were particularly asked to look out for radicalised Muslim students. Now they've broadened that category to include basically anyone who has an opinion. We're supposed to be on the lookout for people who exhibit signs of fanaticism of any kind. In terms of occupations on campus, if you're a member of academic staff, you often get emails telling you what to do in the event of occupation. They'll tell you things like, don't speak to them, don't try to reason with them, don't on any account leave your staff card lying around, they might use it to enter parts of the building, and so on. All of these kind of attempts to divide teaching staff from the people they're teaching and the people that they're supposed to be caring for and working with. We have issues about security on campus, a desire and a demand in some quarters for the police to be on campus. This is something that in Paris after '68, police were banned from campus. This is one of the demands. We're seeing this more and more, this kind of blurring of the boundaries between kind of security agents and police force, where one becomes indistinguishable from another. We've had, despite all of these kind of cuts and so on, universities spending millions of pounds on security systems, fingerprinting, swipe carding, all of these things, dystopian kind of images of, again, surveillance and monitoring. It makes being a kind of lecturer a really, really unpleasant job in lots of ways, and obviously there are lots of lecturers who refuse to participate in these kind of bureaucratic and oppressive measures. But then again, also we see kind of targeting against certain lecturers as well, and people are losing their jobs, ostensibly for other reasons, but often because of union organising or refusing to comply with these kind of police state measures. We saw at my university at Roehampton, when we had a brief occupation during the wave of student occupations, the management turned around and lied to the students, claimed there was asbestos in the room that they had occupied and that their health was at risk, so they had to leave. What we see when students come out of prison, students who've been arrested and imprisoned for protesting, so to defend the very thing that the universities are for, going through another process of punishment at the very institutions that they were fighting to save. We see courts set up, we have universities mimicking court structures. They even have it at Oxford and Cambridge, they even use old judges. Of course, they're friends with lots of old judges, so hey, it's a bit of fun for them to run a sort of mock course. To see whether students can be allowed back onto their courses, this kind of thing. What we see time and time again, I think, is this kind of multiplication of punishment. We've got surveillance and all of these things we're supposed to be doing all the time. But when people break the line, when they're arrested for protesting, we get this kind of, you know, absolute prolongation and sort of multiple punishment. So you've got, you know, you're on a protest, you're attacked by the police on the day, you're arrested, you have to wait for a court appearance, you're in court, you're in prison, and if that wasn't enough, you come back to the institution that you fought to try to save, and you get another round of trials, and another kind of series of investigations, and so on. And I think, you know, if we're going to have forms of solidarity among teaching staff and with our students, we have to really, really resist these kind of bureaucratic internal measures, the surveillance, but also the extra punishment, the internal court system of universities. We do not want universities to look like courts. This is, you know, really a central feature. Okay, clearly we're living in a climate of repression, with these endless kind of deterrent and exemplary sentences, and universities should be the last place that are kind of replicating that kind of, you know, exemplary punishment of people for stepping out of line. At the same time, we have had some minor victories here and there. When Kingston University were suggesting they weren't going to let back a student who had been arrested and imprisoned for protesting, students at Kingston and other universities mounted a national campaign to shame the university, basically, to say, if you don't let this guy back in, you know, we are going to occupy, we're going to embarrass you. And the one thing we do have is that these universities do not want any negative PR, right? In this time of fees and desperate competition for places and all this, the one weapon we have against them is their desire to have a clean PR image, you know, and we can use that against them. We can say that we're going to morally shame you if you don't let people back in, and we're going to ruin your the smooth running of your campus. And that worked. They backed down and let the guy back in without any problems. I think in this position we've obviously lost certain kind of key battles. We've lost the fees battle against massive resistance and the massive police repression and violence that we saw on the day, and then the endless kind of sentencing of students after that. We need, I think, to go back to original demands, following the examples set elsewhere in Quebec and Chile, to say no fees, to say full grants, to say no police on campus. I think any of these reformist measures where we demand something like, you know, less fees or whatever, you know, it's never going to work. We need to say, you know, we need to go back to these original demands and say, look, everybody should have a free place at university. Why does this sound idealistic and utopian now? This was a truth not that long ago. I went to university in 1997. I was the last year to not pay fees. My local authority paid fees, as they paid fees for everybody. It wasn't that long ago. I talk to my students now and I tell them this and they can't believe it. You know, there's this sense of just utter disbelief. But this was a historical truth, and it wasn't that long ago. And we need to be saying these things, you know, demanding these things from scratch, I think. You know, at the same time, we're always defensive, we're always on the back foot. We have to defend people, we have to support people as they're going through court and prison. But we can't just be on the back foot, we can't just be defensive. We have to also make these demands and make them really, really clearly. And there are global examples and things that we can follow, particularly Quebec. You know, winning certain demands after a long series of struggles, you know, general assemblies, a kind of endless pressure. One of the most successful student occupations was in Glasgow. It was the longest occupation, and they won all of their demands, including that they don't be punished by the university authorities or by the police. It can happen. We need to keep up the pressure. And one thing I think, even if we can get back to a position where the kinds of debates that we used to have about university education, for example, about questions about meritocracy, about the influence of cultural capital and class, and all of the divisions that already exist within institutions, so between, let's say, the Russell Group, the supposed top 20, and everybody else. You know, what we're seeing, unfortunately, is more of a divide between these groups. You know, with the Russell Group demanding that they be allowed to charge massive amounts of fees you know, separately from other universities, supposedly lesser institutions. What we need to do is try and get solidarity between university and HE institutions and FE institutions and schools as a whole to fight for an image of education that lots and lots of people, the majority of people in this country, need to support and defend and believe in. You know, the class structure in Britain is such that these things are perpetuated through education. We know that 7% of people go to private school. 93% of people don't go to private school, right? But we're run by these bastards. Anyway, you know, we need to sort of, insofar as it's possible, eliminate these hierarchies. The hierarchies in HE, in each institution, between different institutions and so on. To defend at the level of subject, let's say, my own subject, philosophy, has been closed down left, right and centre. The university I teach at now is the only post-92 institution in London that teaches philosophy. All the others, Greenwich, London Met, so on, Middlesex, have all been closed down. Ostensibly under the heading of cuts, but particularly to arts and humanities. And we need solidarity from other people within the subject, because you'd have thought if you're interested in philosophy, let's say, or any other subject, that you have a vested belief in the right of this subject and the proliferation of this subject, wherever it's going on. But what we see instead often is a kind of betrayal, I think, between institutions. And this is something I think we need to work on, really. So I guess all of those things are kind of a question, like the elimination of security, making sure police aren't on campus, you know, to be in a position where we're not supposed to be surveilling our fucking students, you know, is that we're actually in a position to teach them, not watch over them. And I think we've got a long way to get back even to those questions about cultural capital and those questions we used to have about meritocracy and so on, because things are so bad. But I think it's not entirely hopeless, and hopefully this autumn we'll see a kind of general solidarity between the TUC march and the student protest in particular, and hopefully everyone will come out for those things. So that's it.
Before I start, first of all, I'd like to thank the Defend the Right to Protest and the students at Ian from Sussex University for the fight they put up to get my son back into education. However, I don't think I haven't seen Ian and any of the others for a while, but my son was studying politics and French at Sussex, but since then he's given up from Sussex University. He stopped studying politics and he's changed direction totally. He's moved to another university and he's now studying classics, which is okay, but ironically he went to prison for, he got a sentence of 15 months when he protested against the rise in tuition fee. He got a sentence of 15 months, spent 3.5 months in prison, and the rest on probation and on tag. And ironically, he's now having to pay £9,000 a year to change his course, which I'm so pissed off about. My son was one of the people who retaliated against the kettling, the force the police were using. He had witnessed other students being hit with batons. He'd taken students to first aid, and he too retaliated against this level of brutality, and in turn he was arrested. And he was charged with violent disorder. And what he actually did was throw a stick, and he did admit to throwing his beer can as well. And for that, he got sentenced to 15 months imprisonment. He was actually made a scapegoat, I believe, without any doubt. The other students who were sent down because of their political beliefs were also used to send a message very, very clearly out. Don't go on a march unless you're prepared to go to prison or you're prepared to get yourself a criminal record. And that's literally, I think, what's happened to all those students who got sent down. The impact of that was that our family were just destroyed for a while. His education was put on hold, and as I said before, we now have to face this £9,000 bill. Education is not and should never be allowed to become a business, and that's literally what is happening now. I mean, I, like Nina, also went through free education. I'm actually a school teacher, so I'm in education. I went freely. I mean, it's many, many years ago. I had a little grant of about £300 every term, and so you can imagine how long ago that was. But I managed, and it's really right that everyone who wants to go into higher education should be given that right, and they should not, by any stretch of the imagination, be charged for doing so. The right for education, as it happens, is supposed to be state-owned, and only a government should really be involved in providing education, and in particular higher education. And to try and make it a business by charging these astronomical fees is absolutely should be fought for by everyone, young and old, because it should never ever be allowed to happen. Every time a march is about to take place, we get a letter that comes through to our house. It doesn't matter what this march is about. It just tells us there is a march going to go on. You should not be taking part in it. So basically, because his name is now registered and he's now a criminal as such, he's now targeted. His freedom, in a sense, has been taken away because he is being stopped by the authorities for going out there to fight for what he believes in. Because they are using now intimidation tactics to stop him, basically, and anyone involved with him from going out there. So the numbers of people involved in any sort of protest will diminish. The police, in a way, have become kind of so powerful by this type of intimidation tactics that they are using. And this, in a way, really, I think my son, one of the reasons he's probably changed to classics, it's a kind of, as one of his friends says, it's a gentleman's subject. So he's now being swayed away from somehow his political beliefs because he's frightened. He doesn't want to go back into prison. He doesn't want to be that face where he's out there, and if they're looking for people in a crowd, he's the one that they pick on, because 3.5 months in prison has changed my son beyond recognition. And sorry, I still get upset about it. But so what I'd like to say to end this is that education is not and should never become a business. It is right to protest, and no one should be faced with police brutality, intimidation, and then criminalized when they do so. It's our right to protest against any injustice, and we should never be frightened into doing nothing to continue the fight for what we believe in. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, hi, my name's Ian. I'm a student at Sussex University. I'm mainly going to be talking about the campaigns both in defence of education and defending our right to defend education, essentially, at Sussex. I think the first point to start at is obviously the Sussex 6 campaign and the campaign against the closure of a number of departments at the university and at the sacking of 115 staff, and this happened roughly about 4 years ago. And within universities there are, and like most institutions, there are antagonisms going on. In most workplaces and stuff, those antagonisms will be reduced to employees and employers. But there's a third dynamic brought into education, and that's us, that's students. Like the people they want to view as customers, essentially, don't tend to behave like customers all the time. We do have a tendency to occasionally storm into the manager's office and sit down for a few days. And this is essentially what happened at Sussex 4 years ago. There was a mass occupation of Sussex House, the management building, and essentially the head of security locks himself in a little room, calls the police and says he's being held hostage. Riot police storm onto campus with dogs and batons, and they pull the students out by force. And 6 people are isolated as ringleaders of this movement and kicked out. In this situation, there's a mass anger about this. We are defending our education, and we are criminalised for it, and we are chucked out. And this notion that they could get rid of 6 people seen as ringleaders and kill the movement was rubbish. It died. There was a mass occupation of the largest lecture theatre on campus that lasted for a week, and the 6 were reinstated. Sorry, I've lost my place. And this, there's an example we can draw from this. Within these antagonisms, compliance equals acceptance, effectively. When the university management draw a line, we have to cross it, essentially. If we respect it, there's no recourse to change these things. And in a way, in this situation, the university management did us a favour, because we know that if they draw a line and we don't like it, we can cross it and we can overturn it. And this was useful for us, to be honest, going into the campaign to defend Xenon, and because the Xenon's reinstatement, his ability to come back into university, into Sussex after he'd finished his sentence, was effectively in the hands of management, and that's a dangerous position to be put in. This person's got a massive stamp on his forehead that says, "I'm a troublemaker," and I'm sure if we'd let it happen, they would have happily said, "No, you're not coming back." And so this is like that. There's a balance of power going on within the institution, and our job is essentially to tip that balance in our favour. And we did that by calling emergency general meetings of the union, passing messages of solidarity with Xenon and against the criminalisation of protest. And we also did this by calling a mass public meeting that addressed the political issues as well, because there was a tendency for some people, maybe just like people who cared about this campaign because they cared about Xenon, to say that we need to keep this just as about this is a miscarriage of justice, essentially, they said. But I think we had to make it quite plain that this wasn't a miscarriage of justice. This is the establishment's notion of justice. A justice that says when the police are losing face, we have to defend them, and we have to criminalise students for protesting. And this is the justice they offer us. That's why we called this public meeting, to talk about the political issues, because this is an attack on the right to protest. This is an attempt by the government to cover its back, effectively. And so I think, and because of the Sussex 6 campaign, the university were afraid to step over that line. They were afraid to kick Xenon out. I think it's a shame that he hasn't come back, because effectively the police and the government have taken someone from us. They've scared him so much that he's not going to come back to university. He's not the same person. They've taken a person away from the movement. And this is, this is the combination that this is what they give us. They give us anger with their actions, and then they give us fear for fighting back. And me myself, I was on an anti-fascist demonstration in Brighton, and the police acted more violently than I'd ever seen before. Pepper spray, batons, horse charges, and I actually found myself thinking, oh great, they're just going to kick the shit out of us. They're not going to arrest us. And that's the sad situation we find ourselves in. And I think that's something we have to remember. Our power lies in our numbers, and we have to continue protesting, continue demonstrating, and we have to know our power in this situation. So keep at it.